It is such a deep rabbit hole.
There's nothing controversial really about that at all.
I think it's right that he clarifies it.
It's not just about love, it's about illness and death.
Cooper's never intended to make light of such an important issue.
They are being bullied.
That's when he set up the arrangements at Manus and at Nauru.
What is different about Australia?
We are quite different. And I really feel very strongly about this. And I've got a lot going on in my life at the moment.
I think it's ridiculous.
Right, okay, I'm just going to wait for you two to stop bickering.
Hi guys, and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Courtney, and we're your hosts.
Viewpoint is a current affairs program aimed at educating and informing young people on issues they may have little to no awareness of.
In today's show, we'll be exploring how young people feel towards their superannuation accounts and whether or not they should start investing early for the future.
Later on in the segment, we'll also be looking at young people's attitudes towards voting and whether they have been engaging with politics.
So Ryan, how many superannuation accounts do you have?
I'd probably say about 3 or 4. I wouldn't know exactly how many or how much money's actually in them.
Wow, 3 or 4, that's a lot. You should probably get that sorted out. I think I've only got one super account, but the figures really confuse me and I just don't really understand it at all.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. Survey after survey is showing that most young people these days are very uneducated and unengaged with their superannuation.
Yeah, it just seems as though young people don't really care that much about their future retirement and are focusing on achieving their near-term goals, such as buying a house or buying a car and paying off that dreaded uni debt.
Yeah, that's true. Most young people don't even know what superannuation actually is.
We asked young people on social media if they'd had any issues with their own superannuation accounts.
Diana here said she had to do her own research to understand how to manage her super and thinks young people would benefit from learning about this topic.
Nicola said she lost around $500 in fees with the first super company she was with during her first job as a waitress. At the time, she didn't know much about superannuation, so didn't realise that she was automatically paying fees even when she wasn't earning as a full-time student. Because I don't know too much myself about superannuation, I'm very interested to see how we can learn more about it and how you can get those accounts fixed, Ryan.
So let's take a closer look at what young people have said about their superannuation.
Same age, same income, same starting balance.
Moving into adulthood is already a really scary experience. I mean, who on earth wants responsibility? But haul superannuation into the mix and things can get messy.
Superannuation? Yeah, so like the money you get when you retire?
Basically, yeah, when you retire, you know, basically your savings left over after retiring.
Yeah, I know, like, what super fund I have, yep. I think.
I don't think I have super.
I'm with Combank.
I'm with the same.
If you're in any way confused about your super, you're not alone. Patrick Harris is a 20-year-old student who's been struggling with superannuation since he first got a job almost 4 years ago.
Most of the time I'm studying, I'm pretty lame, really. But recently I just got a new job that'll be starting in a few weeks' time. My hobbies include playing the drums, just listening to music, watching movies, or throwing the frisbee at the beach. Yeah, I wouldn't have had a clue of what it was. Like, I'd heard my parents mention it and I knew it was of some importance down the track. So, because my first job was when I was 16, yeah. And so you don't really think about those things when you're so young. And so I just look at my pay slip and it'd just say super contributions, and I just took that hand in hand. And then the ladies in the office that would pay said they would set me up with this super account, and I just took it as it was and yeah, didn't really think about it.
So what on earth is superannuation?
It basically is a form of compulsory saving, if you like, because you can't access it while it's being paid to you up to a certain age. So therefore you can't spend it, and it just keeps going up, hopefully, depending on the market, of course, because it is invested out there in the market and it is driven by the marketplace. So if the market's going well, your savings will be going well, and if it's not, well then it obviously tends to dip as the market dips.
Superannuation is a tax-effective way to save for your retirement. As of 2016, almost 15 million Australians had a super fund account. Now, regardless of whether you're working full-time, part-time, or even as a casual, if you earn more than $450 a month, your employer is required to make contributions to your super fund. This should be about 9.5% of your wages. Your money is then pooled together with other members' money and invested on your behalf by professional investment managers.
My new job set me up with a new super account, so then I had 2 running, and I still didn't know much about the first one. And then after I left that second job, neither of them really had much money in them, and because the super accounts charge you fees, they ended up draining money out, and then by the end neither of them really had money. I think one got cancelled, so it was sort of all over the shop. And because I still really hadn't talked to anyone about how to organise my super, I sort of thought to myself it was just too much and I should just ignore it. And I think that's probably what got it messed up in the first place.
Each account, they charge their own separate fees, things like insurance premiums, administration fees, investment fees. So, you know, they're out, your super monies are out there in these separate little pockets, and each fund needs to charge a certain fee for managing those funds.
And my next job, they from the start were like right onto the whole super situation, and I had to give them my details and everything, and then they got back to me and said that like the money that was sending into my super account was getting returned, and then I should contact my super, so I'm with Australian Super. And then I was pretty slack again and didn't get onto it because I still had that mentality. I was like, this is confusing, I don't want to put the time and effort in.
Now, it's not uncommon for young people to work multiple jobs as they juggle school, uni, and head out into full-time work. But multiple jobs often mean multiple super accounts, and this can become a problem. In 2014, more than 30% of people aged 18 to 25 had more than one superannuation account. This has steadily increased over recent years, mainly due to a growing disinterest in superannuation among young adults, who are at least 3 times less interested in their personal superannuation affairs compared to older people. Multiple accounts can cost you lots of money over time. Most super accounts will typically charge a fixed administration fee of at least $100 a year. The more accounts you have, the more administration fees you'll be charged, so it pays to consolidate everything you have in one account.
The best way to actually find out where your forgotten superannuation monies are, especially with someone that has changed jobs quite often, and there's a lot out there, so the best place would be, in the first instance, to hop online. The ATO have a website that you can try and locate your lost super, use your tax file number, pop it in and do a search, and it should actually identify by tax file number and name, mainly tax file number, whether or not you have superannuation accounts out there that you've basically forgotten about. Once you've identified those super account and monies, you can start contacting the super funds, and these days it's as simple as either filling out a form, or you can get your current employer to actually do that for you. But I think it's much easier to touch base with the super fund yourself, and most things are online now anyway, so basically it's a simple form, and you don't get taxed or penalised by transferring or consolidating all your super monies in the one account.
Consolidating your super funds doesn't have to be a headache. All you have to do is log into your MyGov account and go to the ATO section to view all the superannuation accounts you hold. Consolidating your super in just one account is only a few clicks away, and you can save thousands of dollars over time.
Eventually, a few months into that job, I did, and I managed to get onto this really nice lady that, I only had to speak to her for about 10 minutes all up, and she got me onto MyGov and then talked me through the whole situation, what I had to do, and it was really just a few clicks, changed a few things around here and there, and it was all set up, and then I managed to go into work, and then I got all my super coming through, and then so by the time I left that job, my super had come through, and my super's in pretty good order now. So
people can actually increase or benefit more out of their super by not relying on their compulsory super contributions by their employer. This is particularly important for younger people because they've got a bit more time actually to save a bit more because of the fact that they're younger and you know, they've got an extra few years up to preservation age, which is 55 currently. And you can quite easily salary sacrifice that money, which not only benefits you in terms of increasing your super balance, but it also saves you a little bit on tax as well.
If you're still confused, it pays to start building your super early, and you can do it in a number of simple ways. You can salary sacrifice, taking some of your pay, which will be transferred regularly by your employer into your superannuation account tax-free. You can also ask your employer to make personal contributions from the money you've paid tax on. Low-income earners that do this may be entitled to government contributions as well. Alternatively, you can transfer some of your savings into your super account through direct deposit or BPay. Or if you have more than one super account, you can transfer money between them.
I'll keep that same super. I think it's in pretty good order and I know where it all is now and how to sort of look at it myself and where it's at. And yeah, it's a lot easier now. So I think, and personally I have a better understanding of how super works and how important it is. So I do want to keep on top of it. So yeah, with this new job, I'll definitely continue my current account. I think there's a lot of life skills that we should be taught in school, like high school. And I think a super definitely is one because kids start working around 16 and they're learning to manage money and, you know, buying things. And I think super is just one of those things that's necessary in life and becomes very important down the track. And then if we can start learning about it earlier on, perhaps people have a greater understanding and this will benefit them when they're older instead of getting down when they're 40, 50, 60 looking at retiring and they might have super accounts all over the place and it's just a mess and yeah, they just think, oh, I could have done it better if they had that knowledge in the first place. So that's why I'm very lucky that I know how mine has worked out. Yeah.
The younger people start engaging with superannuation, the less unnecessary accounts we'll see out there. As well as this, it's less likely that people will need to rely on the government as they head into retirement. But to encourage more young people to be engaged, the government and the superannuation industry should make superannuation tangible for young people, help millennials to be informed and advised, be transparent and easy to deal with, and appeal to what's important to young people.
The hardest part was just convincing yourself to make that phone call. It's like, I'm not going to compare it to like a helpline or something, but it kind of is, and that you just got to make that phone call and talk to them, because they were very helpful. Like they would understand. I explained my situation. I'm just a uni student and whatnot, and she totally understood. And she's probably had multiple situations like that. So she is very helpful. And yeah, I just recommend calling them because they will help you out because it's their job.
Now, if you don't have your super sorted, get out there, get it fixed and head over to www.ato.gov.au.
So now we're going to take a closer look at how young people are engaging with politics.
Let's take a look at some of the responses we've received on social media.
Martin said that he thinks Australian politicians struggle to engage with younger voters, despite attempts by the current leaders such as Bill Shorten.
Taylor said she feels more engaged with the American elections and politics than our own, as there is a lack of transparency in what certain policies will mean for us.
It kind of seems like young people in Australia know more about American politics than they do that in their own country. I'm not going to lie, I can relate to this because I didn't even know who any of the candidates were in the most recent election. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm very similar. Like, I've been moving around a bit lately and I actually didn't even know what electorate I was actually in, so I had to go and check that up.
So how can politicians offer more incentives for young people to vote? Let's take a closer look at what young people had to say about the topic.
From the day you turn 18, voting becomes a reality that rolls around every 4 years. But considering Australia's current political climate, it seems like voting is almost an annual tradition. It's a democratic right that gives citizens an equal chance to have their say about Australia's future policies and leaders. But despite how positive it sounds, some young Aussies aren't convinced.
In general, I think it's pretty pointless, to be honest.
I just don't feel like anything at all. Like it's so
pointless thing, I think.
I think voting is great. I mean, it gives everyone an opportunity to sort of have their say rather than just being told what's going to happen in our country.
Yeah, I just rock up. I go the same time as my dad, and then I ask him before what he's going to vote for, and then I just copy.
I just rock up to avoid the fine, if I'm honest. I think so do 9 out of other 10 people.
As someone who was never overly engaged in politics, 20-year-old Joshua Bell has recently taken up the baton. And as a student at the University of Wollongong, he is challenging his peers to get passionate about politics and policy.
So at UOW, it was kind of, I just like at clubs day one time, I saw the Greens and I was like, I don't really want to talk to them. And then when it came into the election period, I was like, well, I probably should look up at this sort of stuff, like look up the sort of things that I need to know. And then I looked at the different policies for like different parties, and I just felt that the Greens were like a group of people that I wanted to be part of. And then eventually I joined their national party, and then joined the UOW Greens because I noticed that they weren't very active, and I was like, well, what's the point of having them if people don't do anything? And that's kind of how I got into student politics at UOW, and then from there, getting more involved and meeting more people, I kind of got involved outside of uni as well.
My name's Gareth Ward. I'm the member for Kiama. I was elected to the State Parliament in 2011 when I was living in Bomaderry, and the council wanted to sell some land that had been set aside for public open space, but I was dead set against that, and the whole street got together. We went to council, we argued the case, and in going to those meetings and participating in those meetings, watching the process, I felt I could do this. And so I stood for council at the age of 22 and was elected, and went on to council and continued to be the Deputy Mayor at 26, both the youngest councillor and youngest Deputy Mayor, and then stood for Parliament in 2011. Now I hold the additional roles of Parliamentary Secretary for the Illawarra and South Coast, which involves working with local groups, local community groups, and representing their views directly to the Cabinet and to the Premier. I'm also Parliamentary Secretary for Education, which means that with the Minister I'm jointly responsible for the state's 2,200 schools, but specifically policy areas involving kids with disabilities and anti-bullying.
The Australian Electoral Commission estimated more than a quarter of young people between the ages of 18 and 24 failed to submit their ballot in the 2013 federal election. In the 2016 election, over 250 eligible voters in the same age bracket weren't even enrolled to vote. This works out to be half of all 18-year-olds and a quarter of all 19-year-olds. One major contributing factor for this is that young people tend to move houses frequently and run the risk of getting lost in the system, especially during the transition period between finishing university and starting full-time work. In 2016, these lost voters could have changed the outcome in nearly a third of electorates, radically redrawing the Australian Parliament. When young people are genuinely engaged, seats will swing and governments will change. In the week before the federal election, 57% of voters under 25 were still undecided on who to vote for. So are politicians missing the mark? Or are young people just lazy and apathetic?
Look, I think that, like any group, young people get engaged around issues. I think there's a lot of talk about young people being more disengaged than ever before. I don't actually agree with that. I think if an issue excites people, if an issue is something that people feel strongly about, they'll come out. But the forums are different. Once upon a time, the only way you could have your say was to go to a town hall meeting. And if you look back to the 40s and 50s, prime ministers would stand in front of halls of people, the community would gather, and there'd be questions fired and there'd be raucous debates. Today, that town hall is your phone. It's it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's right here. This is the modern day town hall, and you can access your MPs by Facebooking them, tagging them in messages, sending private messages via Twitter. There are more touch points, more capacity to engage with your MPs than ever before. I think, though, it's quintessentially Australian to perhaps be a little bit dismissive of politicians and politics, but issues do fire people up, and that doesn't matter whether you're 18 or 88.
I don't think you can really say I don't have an interest in politics, because these things affect you. Like the policies, say like education policies, that affects you, like the amount of funding that you might get, in terms of like welfare, or even things like marriage equality, like those policies do affect you, and so I can't really think of a good enough reason to not get involved. And so I think just like wanting to have things that like affect me in a positive way meant that I needed to get involved, or at least I felt like I needed to.
Youth Action Australia conducted a survey of more than 3,000 Australians from 12 to 25 years old, showcasing their engagement in politics and policies. The top 3 issues to come out of the survey concerned improved policies on asylum seekers, marriage equality, and climate change. Politicians were widely characterised as liars and promise breakers, and it's this attitude that deters young people from utilising their vote effectively. Only half agreed that parliamentarians could be trusted to do what is right for the country, while barely a quarter considered them honest. So then maybe it comes down to policy being overcomplicated and young people being undereducated.
I get the fact that not everyone will be interested, but they are affected. And if you're going to be a little bit affected, you should be at least a little bit interested. I'm not asking every young person to want to go into politics, although I welcome young people getting involved in politics. And as someone who was a young person elected at a young age, I always encourage young people right across my electorate to take an interest. But I'm not asking people to make their lives about that. I'm just simply saying, think about the sort of community you want, the sort of policies that you think are going to be good for you, the sort of jobs and investment that you want to see from whatever side of politics it is that you support, the sort of environmental policies, the sort of cultural and community policies. Your vote matters, and the sort of government you have in place will affect the sort of community you want to see.
A lot of the people I engage with through politics are engaged, but on the flip side to that, most of the people aren't, just because they just, I don't know, they don't care as much, or they just don't think that their vote does anything, which is kind of a bit shit. But I think, yeah, most of the people I talk to, it's literally half-half. Maybe half of them are like, yep, I'm really involved because I've met them through politics, and then the other half are like, no, I don't want anything to do with it.
There are so many repressive regimes around the world. I think that because we've grown up in a country whose liberties and freedoms have been fought for by so many people before us, so many generations before us, I think sometimes people do take that for granted. I don't. I certainly value the capacity to stand up, to speak my mind, and to be part of a group of people that is creating the sort of state that I want to see, the sort of country I want to see. And I think that that is really important. But that doesn't happen without inspiration. It's also the job of leaders to show leadership and to show the way. The challenge to leaders is to create more leaders and not more followers. And it's important that people in positions of leadership encourage the next generation to succeed.
In a national survey of Year 12 students, half said they lacked the knowledge to understand important political issues, to differentiate between the values of each political party, and didn't have the ability to make an informed decision when it came time to vote. Gen Y is the unhappiest with the way democracy and voting works in Australia when compared to Gen X, baby boomers, and the builders generation. Gen Y also had the largest portion of people who carried negative views about compulsory voting than any other generation, with only 50% saying they would vote if it were optional. Even so, figures released by the Australian Electoral Commission suggest that things are changing. Between the 2013 and 2016 federal elections, political participation in 18-year-olds rose by almost 50%. Young voters were found to be actively using social media as a way to participate and engage in politics and policy debates. And Josh says he's seen firsthand just how passionate young people can be.
Young people, I've found, are a lot more aggressive in their campaigning. So we've done a lot of work with the Refugee Active or Refugee Collective group in the Illawarra, which is mostly older people who are a lot more passive, so they might have a peaceful protest and they might just stand outside someone's office with signs, whereas young people, they tend to be a lot more aggressive, so they'll be a lot louder, they'll be they'll chant and they'll march and things like that. I think that's one thing that gets them involved. I think different circumstances means that like the level of engagement is really different. There's been a lot of people engaged with same-sex marriage here on campus. Whenever we have rallies, people will stop by and tell us like how great it is that we're doing it and how much they support us. The rally that we had the other day, we were marching and I think like 5 or 6 people just joined the march and walked with us. But I think in terms of student politics, you get that classic, this isn't for me, like I don't know anything about this, I don't want to be part of this. And so I think student engagement with actual politics is a bit like kind of dodgy. But when it comes to specific issues that affect students, I think that's more likely to get them involved.
So what are the finer details you need to know about voting? It's compulsory to vote if you are aged 18 or over, but you can enrol to vote from 17. You can do this online at www.aec.gov.au. You need to have lived at your current address for at least 1 month before you can change your address on the electoral roll. And failing to vote in an election without a valid reason will cop you a fine anywhere between $20 and $170. If you're feeling stuck and don't know how to get engaged, learning firsthand is a great way to figure out how things work.
Ring your local MP, talk to them about your views, ask to meet with them, get involved in a political party, whatever political party that may be. Obviously, I have a series of political views, other members will have other views. Ask to spend a day with your local MP. I love nothing more than having students who are doing work experience come in and spend some time in my office, come to Parliament. I have a youth leaders forum every year to say to young people, think about the sort of community you want to live in and also show some leadership yourself. Don't just leave it to other people. If it's meant to be, it's often up to you. And I think encouraging people to realise what a difference they can make by being involved is something I try to do. Even in my own private office, I employ a lot of younger people, indeed people at this university who are studying, to make sure that they can be involved in the world of politics and government and also understand and learn more about what change they can implement and affect as well.
So hopefully that piece will encourage more young people to become engaged with politics.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Ryan.
And this is Viewpoint.